She came to his estate as a maid. But from the very beginning, everything had been a lie. Alara thought she could keep her secrets buried. But how could she ever deceive Lachlan Davenport? One night, he stood at her door, his gaze dark and unreadable. "I looked into you." Alara froze. "Your real name isn't Alara." His voice was low, edged with quiet danger as he stepped closer. "So tell me, why did you come for me?" She couldn't run anymore. Her secret had been exposed. Step into the world of Alara and Lachlan, where this is no longer a game of victory or defeat, but a battle only the heart can decide. If it were you, what would you choose? Let the story begin. The wind howled through the barren trees, carrying with it the biting chill of the night. In the middle of the desolate land, Davenport Manor loomed like a silent phantom cut off from the outside world. The Gothic estate stood in eerie grandeur, its towering, stone-gray walls draped in ivy, its windows tall and hollow, like the empty eyes of a beast lurking in the dark. Inside, candle flames flickered atop golden sconces, casting feeble glows that barely touched the vast coldness of the mansion. The lavish interior, though opulent, felt hollow, as if someone had long since stolen its soul, leaving behind only a perfect, lifeless shell. Every silver ornament gleamed, pristine and untouched, for no one dared lay a hand on anything without permission. The servants moved like whispers in the dark, following one unspoken rule: silence. No one made a sound too loud. No one held their master's gaze for too long. Lachlan Davenport ruled this house, not just with wealth, but with fear. And tonight, an outsider had stepped into the lion's den. Alara stood before the massive oak doors, fingers tightening at her sides as she took in the monstrous estate before her. Beneath the moonlight, the mansion looked less like a home and more like a slumbering predator, waiting for the fool who dared enter its domain. A gust of wind sent a shiver through her, sweeping strands of hair across her face. She took a slow, measured breath, then lifted her hand and knocked. 3 seconds. The doors swung open soundlessly, too soundlessly, as if the house had long since grown accustomed to welcoming those who came and went in silence. A butler stood on the threshold. He was older, his uniform crisp and flawless, his sharp gaze revealing nothing. "Miss Alara?" His voice was deep, devoid of warmth. "Yes. Follow me." She dragged her small suitcase inside. The warmth of the house was not enough to chase away the chill from outside. Or perhaps it was this place itself that carried the cold. She did not hesitate. She did not flinch the way others might. Instead, her eyes moved, memorizing everything. The endless corridors, the velvet curtains so thick they swallowed any trace of moonlight. The portraits, old, watchful, their painted gazes trailing her no matter where she stood. Servants are forbidden from entering the second floor unless directly summoned by Lord Davenport, the butler stated as they passed a grand staircase. "You do not speak unless spoken to." And he stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Do not attempt to draw his attention." Alara only smiled, a ghost of amusement flickering across her lips. She was taken to the servants' quarters, a modest room with a single bed and a wardrobe. Compared to the grandeur outside, this was nothing, but she didn't complain. Setting her suitcase down, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket, fingers grazing its surface before she carefully tucked it away inside the drawer. A knock at the door. A young woman peeked inside, her brown eyes filled with curiosity and something else, worry. "You're new." Alara nodded. The girl stepped in, shutting the door softly behind her. "I'm Amelia. I work here too. I just wanted to warn you about something." Alara waited. "Lord Davenport is unlike anyone you've ever met," Amelia whispered, voice dropping as if afraid someone might hear. "He doesn't care about people. He doesn't show mercy. If you make a mistake, you won't get a second chance." She swallowed hard. "And don't think about leaving early. No one comes here without a price." Alara studied her carefully, then spoke, voice quiet yet unwavering. Doesn't everyone have a price? Amelia froze, unsure how to respond. She didn't know. Alara had already accepted the cost long ago. That night, Davenport Manor was draped in an eerie elegance, bathed in the golden glow of its crystal chandeliers. A long dining table stretched across the grand hall, pristine white linens covering its surface. Every silver utensil gleamed under the light, perfectly arranged, reflecting the quiet opulence of the evening. Alara kept her head bowed as she entered, a tray of wine in her hands. Though she was new to the household, she had quickly learned the rules. Move silently. Pour the wine in precise order. Avoid attention. Do not make mistakes. But no matter how careful one was, fate always had a way of testing people. As she reached Lachlan Davenport, she felt the cold weight of his presence before she even looked his way. She didn't need to meet his gaze to know he was watching. Her breath slowed. With steady hands, she poured the wine. But just as she did, a careless movement, a slight nudge from another servant behind her. Crash! Glass shattered. Red wine spilled, blooming like blood across the immaculate white carpet. Silence. The entire room froze. The other servants paled, their eyes darting toward the accident as if the very air had turned to ice. One of them stepped back, subtly distancing themselves, as if proximity alone could make them guilty by association. Alara blinked once. She had made a grave mistake. No one in Davenport Manor made mistakes and walked away unscathed. A chair scraped against the floor. Lachlan Davenport stood, slowly, deliberately. For the first time, Alara lifted her gaze, meeting him head-on. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he commanded the room effortlessly, not through volume, but through sheer presence. His sharp features were carved in cold precision, but it was his eyes that were most dangerous. Ice gray, emotionless, unforgiving. The air in the room tightened. Look up. His voice was quiet, yet it carried through the hall like a blade cutting through still water. Alara obeyed. She did not flinch. She did not tremble. You're new. It wasn't a question, merely a statement of fact. Yes. A pause stretched between them. Alara knew this was the moment when most people would bow their heads, stammer apologies, beg for forgiveness. But she didn't. Instead, she stood there, unmoved. Lachlan tilted his head slightly, his gaze razor-sharp. You're not afraid? Alara's lips curled at the edges, barely a smile. Why should I be? The room held its breath. No one had ever spoken to Lachlan Davenport like that before. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not annoyance, something else. His lips corked upward. Not a smile, but something far more unsettling. Interesting. His voice was slow, deliberate. His gaze flicked toward the wine-stained carpet. That was a Persian rug. $20,000. Alara glanced down at the deep red stain, stark against the white. It looked like a pool of blood. Then she looked back up. Then I'll clean it. A stunned silence. Most servants would have thrown themselves at his feet, pleaded for mercy. She had given him a simple, almost absurd answer. Lachlan studied her, as if peeling back every layer she thought she had hidden. A second passed. Another. Then, a laugh. Low, amused. Not the kind that spoke of humor, but of discovery. Your name? Alara. Alara. He repeated, as if engraving it into memory. And you believe you can erase that stain? She glanced at the rug again, then back at him. No, she admitted, but I'll try. Something darkened in his gaze, though his expression remained unreadable. Then, good. You have 1 hour. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The room remained frozen long after he left. The moment the doors closed behind him, the other servants rushed toward Alara, their voices hushed but frantic. Are you insane? Amelia whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Do you have any idea who he is? What he's capable of? Alara only shrugged. Then, without another word, she picked up a cloth and began scrubbing. She didn't need anyone to remind her of Lachlan Davenport's danger, because she already knew. What he didn't know was that he should be careful of her. Alara knelt, carefully scrubbing the crimson stain from the expensive Persian rug. She knew there was no way to erase it completely, But still, she tried. If this was a test from Lachlan Davenport, she had no intention of failing. From the darkened corridor above, a pair of eyes watched her in silence. Lachlan stood on the second floor, leaning against the balcony railing, his gaze sharp and calculating as he observed the girl who had dared to challenge him. Most who made mistakes in front of him trembled, begged, and pleaded for mercy. A mercy that never existed. But Alara, she wasn't afraid. She didn't try to appease him. She didn't fall to her knees. She didn't even look unsettled. She simply accepted the challenge. A cold smile ghosted across Lachlan's lips. He didn't despise those who failed. He despised those who were weak. And Alara, she didn't seem to be one of them. The next morning, as Alara was neatly making her bed, her door swung open. Amelia stood there, her expression tense. "Are you all right?" Alara blinked, then let out a soft laugh. "Did you think I'd be thrown out on my first day?" Amelia didn't laugh. Instead, she grabbed Alara's arm, pulled her into the hallway, and looked around cautiously before lowering her voice. "You don't understand what's happening, Alara." Her words were barely above a whisper. "Lord Davenport never gives second chances. The ones who made mistakes before you, they're not here anymore." Alara's brows knit slightly. "What do you mean?" Amelia hesitated, wetting her lips before she finally whispered. "Do you know why no one dares to make mistakes in this house?" Alara waited. Amelia exhaled shakily. "Because the ones who did disappeared." A draft swept through the corridor, carrying a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Alara held Amelia's gaze for a long moment. Then, instead of fear, she asked something entirely different. "Then why am I still here?" Amelia faltered, momentarily speechless. Alara smiled. "Maybe I haven't made a big enough mistake yet." In the days that followed, Alara fell into the rhythm of life within Davenport Manor. Her tasks were endless, polishing ornate furniture that gleamed yet felt lifeless, sweeping through endless corridors, and serving dinners where only one man sat at the head of the table, eating in silence while the entire room held its breath. The other servants kept their distance. None of them wanted to be associated with the girl who had made a mistake and yet remained. They whispered behind her back, their voices lowering as she passed. "She's reckless. I can't believe he let her stay. Maybe she's not like the rest of us." Alara paid them no mind. She hadn't come here to make friends. She had come here for something else. A week passed. By then, she had learned the unspoken rules of Davenport Manor. No one was allowed on the second floor. No one entered Lachlan Davenport's private library. No one held his gaze for too long. But one night, as she was cleaning the hall, an older maid stopped her. "Listen, girl." The woman's voice was low, firm. "I don't know who you are, but if you want to survive here, then..." She glanced around cautiously before leaning in. "Do not attract his attention." Alara tilted her head slightly, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Then, with quiet certainty, she murmured, "It might be too late for that." Lachlan Davenport had never cared for the servants in his estate. They came, did their work in obedient silence, and disappeared like shadows. Invisible, nameless, insignificant. But Alara was different. She wasn't meek or fearful like the others. She was quiet, careful, but never timid. She didn't seek his favor. She didn't shrink when passing by him. And that was precisely why Lachlan noticed her. At first, he merely observed her from a distance, saying nothing. In the beginning, he assumed she was simply reckless, a fool who didn't know better. But the longer he watched, the more he realized she knew exactly what she was doing. Every movement had a purpose. She moved with practiced ease, yet not with the stiff precision of a trained servant. She never made mistakes, yet she wasn't overly cautious like those who lived in fear. She was sharp, adaptable, and above all, she wasn't afraid of him. For the first time in a long while, Lachlan was intrigued. 3 days after the spilled wine incident, Alara's workload changed. She was no longer assigned simple tasks. Instead, the difficulty of her duties increased. That morning, she was ordered to clean the grand crystal chandelier in the main hall, a task usually given to a team of 3. By the afternoon, she was sent to the stables at the back of the estate, a place only senior staff were allowed to enter. That night, She was instructed to reorganize Lachlan's private library, a place even his most trusted servants rarely stepped foot in. Anyone with half a mind would recognize this for what it was. This was no coincidence. You don't think this is strange? Amelia caught her in the hallway, watching as Alara worked tirelessly without complaint. No one else in this house is treated like this. No one is given this much work at once. Alara set down her mop, her voice calm. Then why me? Amelia exhaled sharply. Isn't it obvious? She glanced around before leaning in, voice dropping. He's testing you. Alara smirked faintly. I know. Amelia's eyes widened. You know? And you're still going along with it. Alara didn't answer. She simply lowered her gaze and continued working. From his second-floor balcony, Lachlan stood, a glass of wine in hand, watching her. He had been observing her all evening. She was scrubbing the grand staircase, her patience unwavering, her hands steady. Anyone else would have given up by now. But Alara? She didn't complain. She didn't falter. She didn't break. She knew he was testing her. And instead of resisting, she accepted it with quiet defiance. Lachlan took a slow sip of his wine, his gaze thoughtful. He wondered, how long would she last? And more importantly, who was she really? Lachlan Davenport didn't believe in coincidences. In his world, everyone had their place. Servants were shadows. Subordinates followed orders. Rivals plotted to bring him down. But Alara, she belonged to none of those categories. She didn't try to please him like the other staff. She didn't flinch under his gaze. She simply existed, doing her job with quiet precision, neither submissive nor defiant. She was different, and that unsettled him. That afternoon, when Lachlan stepped into the library, he hadn't expected to find this. Alara, standing between towering shelves, holding a thick book on business management. Not a romance novel, not a cookbook, not something a housemaid would typically read, but a book on economics, finance, and corporate strategy. Lachlan paused at the doorway, watching. She hadn't noticed him, or maybe she had, but chose to ignore him. She turned a page, her eyes scanning the text with unwavering focus. She wasn't skimming. She wasn't pretending. She understood what she was reading. And that was the moment Lachlan knew she had a secret. Alara. His voice cut through the air, low and commanding. Alara didn't startle. She didn't fumble to hide the book like a guilty thief caught in the act. Instead, she calmly closed it, slid it back into place, and turned to face him. Mr. Davenport. Her tone was even, unshaken. Lachlan stepped forward, his gaze never leaving her. What were you reading? Alara tilted her head, as if the question was of little importance. Just a book. His brow lifted slightly. On business management? A faint smile ghosted across her lips. Is there something wrong with expanding one's knowledge? A sharp response. Too sharp. Lachlan studied her for a moment. Then a slow, knowing smile curved his lips, not one of amusement, but of danger. You have an interest in business? Alara met his gaze without hesitation. I think knowing more is always better than knowing nothing. Clever. Too clever. Lachlan slid his hands into his pockets, stepping closer, too close. The space between them narrowed to a single breath. Who are you really, Alara? His voice dropped, a quiet threat wrapped in velvet. Her expression didn't change. I'm just a housemaid. Lachlan tilted his head, his gaze cutting through her like a blade drawn from its sheath. Are you? He didn't believe her. And now, he wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. That night, Davenport Manor shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers. The grand ballroom buzzed with quiet power. Glistening gowns swept across the floor, tailored suits blended seamlessly into whispered negotiations. This wasn't just a party. It was a battlefield where billion-dollar deals were sealed with charming smiles and the delicate clink of champagne glasses. Alara moved through the crowd, balancing a tray of wine with practiced ease. Head down, eyes averted, invisible, just as a servant should be. And yet, one pair of eyes never left her. Lachlan Davenport. Alara knew she shouldn't be here. The men in this room weren't just businessmen. They were wolves. Men who controlled not just wealth, but political power. And among them were those who could never, ever know she existed. She turned away the moment she saw the Kensington insignia stitched onto the sleeve of a middle-aged man deep in conversation nearby. And then, a familiar name slipped into their discussion. The Kensington family has been rather quiet lately. Seems like their daughter has vanished. Hasn't she? Alara stilled. Their daughter. They were talking about her. Fingers tightening around the tray, she forced her breathing to stay even. No one knows where she ran off to. One of the men chuckled darkly. But I hear she's quite intelligent. A shame, really. The sole heir. If we could find her, she'd make a valuable piece on the board. Alara stepped back, moving carefully to slip away. She needed to get out before. Running from someone, Alara. Her breath caught. Cold. Smooth. Amused. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Lachlan. He stood behind her, one hand in his pocket, the other idly swirling the red wine in his glass. He had seen everything. The way her body tensed at the mention of Kensington. The way she avoided certain guests. The way she was trying to disappear. A slow smirk curled at his lips, the gleam in his eyes predatory. A simple maid wouldn't have a reason to fear a conversation like that. Would she? Alara's grip on the tray tightened, but she kept her expression composed. I don't know what you mean, sir. Lachlan let out a quiet chuckle. Too clever. He stepped forward. Instinctively, she stepped back. Really, his voice dipped lower, just for her. Then why do I get the feeling that you are anything but ordinary? A trap. Alara knew this was a trap. If she reacted too strongly, she'd confirm his suspicions. If she dismissed it too easily, he'd only grow more curious. She inhaled slowly, a measured smile forming on her lips. If I'm not what you think I am, she tilted her head slightly, holding his gaze. Then tell me, what am I? For the briefest second, Lachlan paused. Then he laughed. A dangerous, slow chuckle. Do you really want me to answer that, Alara? She didn't respond. Instead, she gave him a polite nod, then disappeared into the crowd. She knew she hadn't escaped his suspicion, but at least tonight, she hadn't let him win. Lachlan watched as she vanished into the sea of people, his fingers gliding absently over the rim of his glass. His gaze darkened. Alara, who are you? And more importantly, why have you entered my world? Lachlan Davenport never allowed himself to be weak. To the world, he was untouchable, powerful, ruthless, undefeated. Feared in the business world not just for his intelligence, but for his merciless precision. A predator at the top of the chain, a king who never stumbled. But no matter how powerful a man was, he could never escape his own body. Alara noticed it first. At dinner that evening, something was different. Lachlan spoke less than usual. His sharp eyes carried an unspoken exhaustion. And when he lifted his wine glass, his grip wasn't as steady as it should have been. The other servants noticed too, but no one dared say a word. No one in Davenport Manor expressed concern for Lachlan Davenport, because in his world, weakness had no place. That night, the estate was eerily silent. Alara was about to retire to bed when hushed voices outside her door caught her attention. He won't let anyone in, one of the maids whispered to the head butler. Amelia, standing beside her, leaned in. Alara, do you know what's going on? Alara frowned. What? Lord Davenport is sick, Amelia murmured, her voice barely above a breath. We brought him medicine, but he refuses to take it. Alara stilled. For a fleeting moment, an image flashed in her mind. Lachlan, alone in that vast room, battling a fever, refusing help from anyone. She didn't know why her feet moved before her mind had fully processed it. Before she realized it, she was already at his door. The butler's eyes widened in alarm. Alara, what are you? Give me the medicine. Her voice was calm, unwavering. Are you mad? He will. Just give it to me. A pause. Then, with a resigned sigh, the butler placed the packet in her hand. Alara grasped it firmly, then knocked. No response. She pushed the door open. Lachlan's bedroom was dark. Only the moonlight, filtering through heavy curtains, illuminated the figure lying on the bed. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his skin flushed with heat from a fever. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, one arm resting over his forehead, his breath slow and heavy. Alara had never seen him like this. Not the ruthless businessman, not the untouchable force that dictated the world, not the cold, calculating devil that everyone feared. Just a man struggling against something as simple and as human as illness. She set the medicine down on the table, poured a glass of water, then approached the bed. Lord Davenport. Lachlan didn't open his eyes, but his voice, though hoarse, was still firm. Leave. The order was absolute, but Alara didn't move. You have a fever of nearly 39 degrees. If you don't take this, you won't even be able to stand by morning. Lachlan despised being told what to do, but tonight his body was too drained to argue. His eyelids fluttered, then finally lifted. Alara held his gaze without hesitation. You don't have to prove your strength to me, she said, her voice quiet, steady. Lachlan stared at her. For a moment, she thought he might order her out again, but instead, he laughed. Not his usual cold, taunting laugh, but something softer, something far too human to belong to Lachlan Davenport. You're not afraid of me, are you, Alara? His voice was rough, strained. She shook her head. No. A pause. Then Lachlan exhaled, his hand falling limp against the sheets. Alara knew she had won this round. She reached forward, gently pressing the pill into his palm. Take it. Lachlan said nothing, but he swallowed the medicine, washing it down with the water she handed him. A slow, tired breath left his lips. Alara turned to leave, but at that moment, his fingers brushed against her wrist. A fleeting touch, a barely there moment, but it was enough to still her breath. Lachlan had already drifted into sleep, but even in unconsciousness, his fingers remained loosely curled around hers. As if, even unknowingly, he didn't want to let go. Alara looked down at him. For the first time, she didn't see a monster. For the first time, she saw a man. Alara didn't know how long she had been sitting there. Lachlan's hand still loosely held hers, but his skin was cooling. Perhaps the fever was finally breaking. She took a slow breath, reminding herself this was temporary. Tomorrow, Lachlan would wake up. Tomorrow, he would return to being ruthless, controlled, untouchable. Tomorrow, everything would go back to the way it was. She should pull away. Just as she shifted slightly, his grip tightened, and then he opened his eyes. Silver gray, unfocused, unreadable. For the first few moments, there was no sharpness, no cold calculation, just a trace of disorientation. He blinked. Once, twice. His gaze flickered downward, settling on their joined hands. Neither of them moved. The air thickened. Then, slowly he let go, and just like that, the fragile moment shattered. His expression shifted. Control snapped back into place, erasing any trace of vulnerability. His breath was still uneven, but when he spoke, his voice had already regained its edge. Alara, just her name, but it carried warning. She met his gaze, unshaken. You're awake. Her tone was neutral, as if nothing had happened. Lachlan studied her. He knew he had slipped, and he hated it. Alara rose, composure intact. I brought you the medicine because no one else dared enter, she said simply. You should rest. She turned to leave. But then, how long were you here? His voice stopped her mid-step. Alara glanced at him over her shoulder. Long enough to know that even the devil can fall. A blade disguised his words. Lachlan's gaze darkened, not from fever, but from something else. A silent tension coiled in the space between them. At last, Alara inclined her head slightly. Sleep well, Lord Davenport. She turned the knob and slipped out, leaving him alone in the dimly lit room. Lachlan sat motionless, his eyes still fixed on the closed door. His fingers curled into a fist. He hated this feeling, being seen. Elbows on his knees, he ran a hand over his forehead. The fever had broken, but its aftermath still lingered. Alara, who the hell was she? She didn't fear him. She didn't flinch at his weakness. She didn't try to use it against him. She had simply been there. Lachlan hated not being able to read people. But Alara? She was a locked book, and nothing unsettled him more. She was not just a maid. Of that, he was certain. The only question was, How much longer could she keep hiding? Lachlan's suspicion of Alara is growing, but is he truly ready to face the truth? After countless battles of wit and unspoken challenges, what is the mysterious Maid hiding? The pieces are finally coming together, and perhaps the truth is far more dangerous than Lachlan ever imagined. How do you think Alara's secret will be revealed? Will Lachlan accept it, or will he feel betrayed? Leave your thoughts in the comments below before we dive into the next chapter. The clue from Nicholas. Nicholas had always been a careful man. As Lachlan Davenport's most trusted right hand, he rarely spoke without purpose. Every word he uttered was deliberate. Every piece of information he shared was calculated. He was not the kind of man who made mistakes easily. And yet, even the most careful men could sometimes overlook something. That night, Lachlan and Nicholas stood on the balcony of the estate, where the glow from inside couldn't reach them. The night sky stretched silent and endless, with only the faint rustling of the wind weaving through distant trees. Below them, the lavish party carried on. Laughter, clinking glasses, murmured conversations of wealth and power. But they had left it all behind. A glass of red wine, a half-burned cigar, and a conversation neither of them had seen coming. Nicholas swirled the wine in his glass, his gaze contemplative before he finally spoke. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath, something Lachlan did not miss. The Kensington family has been unusually quiet. Lachlan narrowed his eyes. Why are you bringing them up? Nicholas shrugged, but the casual gesture did little to mask the weight in his tone. It's odd. They were once our direct competitors, one of the biggest names in the industry. But lately nothing. No movement. No deals. A corporation like that doesn't simply vanish without reason. Lachlan didn't respond right away. He swirled his own glass, watching the dark liquid shift under the dim light. You think they're in trouble? His voice was steady, but beneath it lay a sharp edge of calculation. Nicholas nodded. Word is their heir has gone missing. Lachlan stilled. His expression didn't change, but his focus sharpened. The heir. Nicholas nodded again, this time leaning in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a well-guarded secret. A daughter, the only child of the Kensington family. He paused before adding, no one knows where she is. No one knows where she is. Such a simple statement, but the moment it reached Lachlan's ears, something deep inside him shifted. He was not a man easily caught off guard, but this was wrong. Silence settled between them. But inside Lachlan's mind, pieces began moving, fragments snapping together, revealing a picture he should have seen long before. A missing heir, a woman who had appeared in his estate out of nowhere, a woman whose demeanor never quite fit the role she played. He inhaled slowly, his thoughts rewinding to every conversation, every glance, every carefully measured word she had ever spoken. A woman with a mind for business, something no other housemaid would care about. A woman who never once flinched in his presence. A woman who didn't want to be found. His breath slowed. Alara. No. Alara Kensington. The realization was cold. Absolute. Nicholas studied him, sharp eyes flickering with curiosity. Lachlan didn't answer right away. He lifted his glass, taking a slow sip. The burn of the alcohol slid down his throat, but it wasn't the liquor sending ice through his veins. Alara had deceived him. From the very beginning, she had walked into his world with a purpose. She had played him, challenged him, looked him in the eye and lied. Every moment of tension between them, every carefully veiled smirk, every time she had met his gaze without fear, all of it had been a deception. A slow anger coiled in his chest. Not like fire, not a violent outburst. No, this anger was cold. Cold enough to feel like he was sinking into ice. Lachlan set his glass down against the balcony railing, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Nicholas arched a brow, watching him go. Where are you going? Lachlan didn't stop, didn't look back. His voice was low, quiet, like the promise of a blade pressing against bare skin. To find a little mouse that's been hiding in my house. Lachlan never believed in coincidences. In business, everything was calculated. Everything had a hidden agenda. If someone entered his life, They wanted something from him, and Alara was no different. She had approached him. She had played his game, and worst of all, she had made him care. His fingers curled into a fist as he strode down the dimly lit corridor. The anger simmering inside him wasn't explosive. It was cold, lethal, a storm gathering beneath the surface. Lachlan could tolerate an enemy who faced him head-on, but a snake slithering through his domain under the guise of innocence. That was unforgivable. And worse than that, he had let her get too far. He stopped in front of the library, the place she always returned to. His mind replayed every interaction, the way she had looked at him when they first met. Confident, unafraid, not the gaze of a servant, the gaze of someone who knew power, someone who knew how to play the game. And yet, he had let her deceive him. A slow, humorless smile curled at his lips. No matter, he would correct his mistake. The library door opened without a sound. Inside, Alara stood beneath the golden glow of the chandelier, surrounded by towering bookshelves. She hadn't noticed him yet. A book rested in her hands, but her eyes weren't moving across the pages. She was thinking. Did she sense something? Did she know she was about to be found out? Silence stretched between them. Then, Alara. His voice cut through the air like a blade. She startled slightly, but only for a fraction of a second. Then, she steadied herself and turned. Her gaze met his, and she knew. He knew. She didn't need to ask. Lachlan had discovered the truth. Alara didn't speak right away. Instead, she assessed him. No one else was in the library. The door was shut. The distance between them was neither too close nor too far. Physically, she was safe. But psychologically, Lachlan was suffocating her with his presence alone. Finally, she broke the silence. Is there something you need, my lord? A simple question, an innocent question, but Lachlan wasn't fooled. He took a step forward. She didn't move. Another step. Still, she held her ground. His eyes narrowed. I should have seen it before. She said nothing. Lachlan tilted his head slightly, studying her the way a predator studies its prey. Tell me, Alara Kensington, what was your purpose in coming here? The room went deathly silent. She didn't deny it. She didn't pretend anymore. She simply stood there, eyes calm but no longer hiding. Lachlan let out a quiet laugh, low, cold, without humor. No clever response this time. Alara slowly set the book down on the table, crossing her arms. What do you want me to say? Her voice was steady. Lachlan clenched his jaw. Even now, she dared to challenge him, even after being exposed. I want to know, he murmured, his voice dark, lethal. Did you ever tell me the truth? Even once. Alara could feel the weight behind his words. This wasn't a game anymore, but she also knew there was no answer that would satisfy him. So she looked him straight in the eye and said, no, a single word, but it shattered whatever fragile line had existed between them. Lachlan exhaled a quiet, sharp breath, a sound almost like a laugh, but void of warmth. His expression was unreadable. His voice was not. You will regret that, Alara. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving her standing in the cold, empty room. The darkness in Davenport Manor had never felt heavier. Lachlan's office had always been an intimidating space, a place of power, of control. But tonight, it was a cage, and inside, there was only one prisoner. Alara. The door slammed shut behind her. Lachlan's gaze locked onto hers, sharp, unyielding, as cold as a blade. No patience, no games, no more distance between them. Only the fury of a man who had been betrayed. He stood there, asterisk tall, commanding, dangerous, asterisk like he could devour her with nothing but his eyes. Alara Kensington. He said her name slowly, every syllable dripping with contempt. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She had known this moment would come. What she hadn't known was how much it would hurt. Lachlan leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms, gaze razor sharp. Well, his voice was low, dangerous. What do you have to say now? Alara held steady. What do you want me to say? No apologies. No excuses. Lachlan laughed, a quiet, humorless sound. You're fascinating, Alara. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Even after being exposed, you still won't admit it. One more step. The space between them vanished. She didn't back down. I never denied anything. Her voice was even. Lachlan tilted his head, his expression unreadable. But you never told the truth either. Alara's fingers curled slightly. Not all truths need to be spoken. A cold smirk touched his lips. Why did you come here, Alara? His voice was quieter now, but laced with something lethal. She inhaled slowly. This was her only chance to explain. But deep down, she already knew. It wouldn't matter. No matter what she said, he wouldn't believe her anymore. At first, I came here, she began, voice steady, because I needed a place to hide. Lachlan didn't move. He simply waited. I never intended to approach you. Silence. Then, Lachlan let out a low chuckle. Is that so? He murmured. Then why didn't you leave when you had the chance? She had no answer. Because she had the chance. And she didn't take it. Not because she was trapped. Not because she was afraid. But because she didn't want to. Lachlan studied her for a long moment before shaking his head, as if disappointed in himself for ever believing anything else. You lie so well, Alara. Silence stretched between them. But this time, it wasn't just anger. There was something else beneath it. Something neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Lachlan didn't understand it. He should feel satisfaction at uncovering her deception. He should feel rage for letting her get too close. But instead, all he felt was emptiness, and he despised it, which meant this had to end. Now, he stepped forward. For the first time, she stepped back. He smirked. The first time you've backed away from me. Alara pressed her lips together, regaining her composure. What do you want from me, Lachlan? His eyes bore into hers. And then, slowly, he delivered the final blow. I want you gone. She didn't react. She had expected it. But still, her chest tightened. She met his gaze, those silver eyes that had once looked at her with curiosity, with something neither of them had dared name. Now, there was only emptiness. Then I'll leave. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Lachlan didn't stop her, but just as she turned, Alara, she paused. She didn't look back. You will regret lying to me. And then he turned away. Neither of them spoke again. She stood there, alone in the vast, suffocating room. Both of them knowing this wasn't the end. Alara stood before her neatly packed suitcase. She shouldn't be here any longer. After the confrontation with Lachlan, she knew she had lost the only shred of trust she had ever gained in this house. Staying would only make things worse. Lachlan had made himself clear he wanted her gone, so she would leave. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. But just as she reached for the handle, it turned from the other side. The door swung open. Lachlan stood there, tall, powerful, those cold, gray eyes piercing through her. Yet something deeper lurked beneath the surface. Alara froze. She had never seen this expression on his face before. Not anger, not mockery, not indifference, but something else. Something she couldn't decipher. Are you here to say goodbye? She broke the silence, keeping her voice even. Lachlan didn't answer right away. Instead, he just watched her. For a long moment, he seemed to be calculating, measuring every subtle shift in her expression. Then, very slowly, he said, No. Alara frowned. Then what do you want? He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The space between them narrowed. She could feel the heat of his presence, the weight of his gaze pressing into her. And then, his voice, low and deliberate. Marry me. For the first 3 seconds, Alara thought she had misheard. Her brows furrowed, suspicion flashing in her eyes. What did you just say? Lachlan did not hesitate. Marry me, he repeated, without an ounce of amusement. Alara let out a short, sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. This is a joke. It's not. She studied his face, searching for any sign that he was playing a game. But this was Lachlan Davenport. He never said things he didn't mean. Alara crossed her arms, her voice steady. You think that after everything that just happened, I would say yes? Lachlan stepped closer, his gaze locking her in place. I'm not asking you to say yes right now. His voice was calm, but edged with unshakable certainty. But you won't leave. Alara's fingers curled. You can't keep me here. Lachlan tilted his head, his expression unreadable. I can. His voice was quiet, dangerous, and she hated it. Hated the sheer confidence in his tone, the way he spoke as if he already knew the outcome, as if she had no other choice. Her jaw tightened. Then tell me, Lachlan. Her voice was sharp. Why do you want to marry me? He didn't avoid the question. You are the heir to the Kensington family, he said. I am a head of the Davenports. And a marriage between us benefits both sides. Alara let out a bitter laugh. Of course, benefits. Not surprising. Not even a little. This was Lachlan Davenport. He didn't believe in love. He believed in power, in transactions. She had known that answer was coming. And yet, for some reason, it still stung. She shook her head. If you want a marriage for convenience, you could pick anyone. Why me? Lachlan held her gaze. And then, he said something that made her breath catch. Because I won't let you fall into someone else's hands. The air in the room shifted. Alara's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to believe it was just strategy, that he simply refused to let go of something he thought belonged to him. But there was something about the way he said it, the way his voice dropped lower, the way his eyes darkened. It wasn't just about power, and she felt it. But she couldn't let herself make that mistake. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to regain control. This isn't love, is it? She whispered. Lachlan didn't answer immediately, and that silence said everything. Then at last he spoke. No love, only power, only control, only possession. Alara didn't know why her chest ached slightly, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't let herself be trapped in his game. She lifted her chin, her eyes burning with defiance. Then no. Lachlan's expression didn't change. No, I refuse. No hesitation. No wavering. She wasn't a piece on his chessboard. She wasn't something to be claimed. Lachlan remained silent. Then, after a beat, he let out a quiet, dangerous laugh. All right. Alara stilled. Too easy. Lachlan Davenport never surrendered this easily. And just as she thought she had won, he leaned in, close enough that his breath grazed her skin, his voice dropping into a whisper. I will make you change your mind. Her entire body tensed. She didn't know exactly what he meant, but she knew one thing for certain. Lachlan Davenport never said anything he didn't intend to make true. Alara once thought she understood Lachlan Davenport. She had believed she could predict his every move, that she knew how to keep a safe distance from this man. But as time passed, an undeniable truth settled in. Lachlan was not a man to be anticipated. He was the kind of man who never accepted defeat. If he wanted something, he would have it, by any means necessary, whether through power, control, or a person. And this time, what he wanted was her. Not out of love, not out of some lingering tenderness between them, but because he refused to let her walk away from his world. Alara had rejected his proposal. She thought she had won, thought that saying no would be the end of it, that even if Lachlan didn't like it, he would let her go. But the moment she looked into his eyes, she knew she had been wrong. There was no anger, no outburst, just a terrifying calm, as if this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Alara began to realize another truth. Lachlan had no intention of letting her leave so easily. She asked the butler to prepare a car. There was none available. She tried to contact someone outside. Her messages went unanswered. She attempted to leave the estate. Somehow, Lachlan always appeared at just the right moment. She wasn't locked in. No doors were barred. No guards held her back. But she knew she was not truly free. And the worst part? Lachlan never once spoke of it. He remained composed, going about his business as if the proposal had never happened. But Alara couldn't ignore the way his gaze followed her in the hallway, at dinner, on the cold marble staircases. He was waiting for her to change her mind, and she could feel it in her bones. Then, one morning, the butler brought her an envelope. Alara took it, the fine paper cool against her fingertips. Slowly, she unfolded it and read the single line inside. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. L. Her grip tightened around the card. A high society event, a gathering of the most powerful figures in finance. She had no reason to be there, but Lachlan had invited her. No, Lachlan had commanded her. She exhaled slowly, realizing she was being drawn into a game she never agreed to play. But whether she liked it or not, she was already a piece on the board. 7 p.m. Alara descended the grand staircase of Davenport Manor. The black gown hugged her frame, elegance woven into every subtle movement. But it was her gaze that commanded attention. Fierce, unyielding, the look of someone stepping onto a battlefield. She was no longer just a housemaid. And when she entered the ballroom, she saw him. Lachlan was waiting, dressed in an immaculate black suit. His gray eyes were as cold as the night beyond the windows. A fleeting smirk ghosted across his lips, sharp, knowing, as if he had foreseen this exact moment. He extended his hand. Alara. She stood still, watching him. In that brief second, a dozen thoughts raced through her mind. If she took his hand, what would it mean? If she refused, what would happen next? But she had never been one to retreat. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. They danced, beneath glittering chandeliers, surrounded by the murmurs and laughter of the elite. Two of the most dangerous players moved in silence. Lachlan led. Alara didn't resist, but she didn't submit. Every step was a move. Every glance was a challenge. The music swelled, soft, elegant, but laced with tension, mirroring the storm between them. Lachlan leaned in, his breath grazing her skin. His voice was low, measured, carrying a dangerous undercurrent. Do you know why I brought you here? Alara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tightened her grip in his, responding without words to the provocation in his tone. Lachlan chuckled softly. Because I want the world to know, you belong to me. Her steps faltered, just for a second, but Lachlan noticed. And that was the move he had been waiting for. Alara clenched her jaw, her eyes darkening. She hated this, hated how he orchestrated everything, how he always dictated the terms. But most of all, she hated the way her heart pounded at those words. She lifted her gaze, letting defiance flicker in her eyes. You can make the world believe that, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. But you can't make me believe it. Lachlan exhaled a quiet laugh, as if she had just amused him. We'll see. Another game had begun, and this time, neither of them intended to lose. Alara had never felt so cornered. She had thought she could escape Lachlan, thought she could walk away from this estate with her pride intact. But somehow, he was always one step ahead. From keeping her here, to backing her into a situation she couldn't refuse, to forcing her into a marriage under the guise of convenience. And now, he had declared to the entire elite world that she belonged to him. The worst part? Alara wasn't sure this was just a game of power anymore. After the gala, Alara returned to her room. But she knew Lachlan wouldn't leave her alone. And, just as expected, the door opened before she could lock it. Lachlan stood in the doorway. His jacket was gone, leaving only a crisp white shirt, the top few buttons undone, revealing the sharp line of his collarbone. He didn't seem rushed, but every movement carried an unspoken weight. We need to talk. His voice was low, steady. Alara crossed her arms, standing her ground. I don't think there's anything left to say. Lachlan's lips curled slightly, but there was nothing soft about his smile. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Alara, he murmured, voice edged with control. Do you really think you can win this game? She didn't step back. I don't care about winning or losing, she replied firmly. I just want my freedom. Lachlan's brow lifted, as if her answer intrigued him rather than angered him. Is that so? He tilted his head, his gaze razor sharp, searching for cracks in her composure. You've had plenty of chances to run, so why are you still here? The question hit harder than she expected. What could she say? That she had nowhere else to go? That no matter how much she denied it, she had been pulled into his world? Into him? No, she wouldn't admit that. So she met his eyes, her voice unwavering. Because you won't let me leave. Lachlan let out a quiet laugh. Exactly. Alara hated the way Lachlan always had control, but she hated even more that he never forced her. He could have backed her into a wall. He could have used his power to make her submit. But instead, he waited. He didn't need to trap her. He knew she wouldn't escape him, and that was what terrified her the most. Lachlan lifted a hand, his fingers gently tilting her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You will change your mind," he murmured, as if it were prophecy. Alara didn't move. "You're too confident." "No." Lachlan leaned in closer, his breath warm against her skin. "I just know it's inevitable." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She couldn't let him see her waver. So she smirked, small, defiant. "If you think I'll break that easily, then you've miscalculated." Lachlan didn't look angry. If anything, his gaze darkened, deepened. Then, he leaned in just enough for his lips to brush her ear. "Then we'll see, Alara." This wasn't over. Lachlan Davenport wasn't the type to surrender. But neither was she. The only question was, who would fall first? Her or him? Alara was not a fool. She never had been. She knew Lachlan wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. When he wanted something, he got it, one way or another. She had seen him do it with business deals, with unfortunate rivals, with anyone reckless enough to stand in his way. So when he didn't bring up marriage again, when he didn't back her into a corner with carefully laid traps, she didn't feel relieved. If anything, it unsettled her more. No more possessive declarations. No more calculated moves. No more orders she had no choice but to obey. But Lachlan didn't need to do any of that. He was still there, quiet, unassuming, yet slipping in her world like an undertow, pulling her beneath the surface. A fleeting glance when she passed him in the hall. A casual remark at dinner, impossible to tell if it was jest or provocation. A silence that stretched too long when his gaze lingered on her. He wasn't forcing her to stay, yet somehow, he was making it impossible for her to leave. One afternoon, Alara stood on the balcony, watching the sun dip beyond the treetops. The sky burned in hues of amber and gold, casting a soft glow over the landscape. The air was calm, but inside, something restless stirred. "Do you think the sunset is beautiful?" A deep voice cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She stiffened. She didn't need to turn around to know who had appeared. Closing her eyes, she took a slow breath before answering. "I didn't take you for someone who has time to admire the view." Her tone was steady, but beneath it, another storm was brewing. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor, measured, deliberate, the sound of a man who belonged wherever he chose to stand. Lachlan stopped beside her. She didn't look at him, but she could feel him. A breeze swept through, tangling in her hair, yet the evening's chill no longer seemed as sharp. They were too close. Close enough that she could sense the warmth of his breath, smell the faint trace of sandalwood lingering on his skin, feel every shift in his posture, even without his touch. They stood there, locked in silence. And somehow, the silence was the most dangerous thing of all. Alara bit her lip, feeling the walls closing in. Lachlan hadn't trapped her. No threats, no commands. But he didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was enough to unravel her. She hated this. Hated how he could make her feel cornered even when no walls surrounded her. She turned, ready to walk away, to create the distance she desperately needed. But before she could take a step, his hand came down lightly on the railing beside her. Not touching her, not restraining her, but blocking her all the same. A perfect trap. No chains, no force. And yet, somehow more dangerous than any cage. "I don't need to force you, Alara." His voice was low, deliberate, every word carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. Alara inhaled sharply, forcing herself to meet his gaze. His storm-gray eyes locked onto hers, impenetrable as always, yet heavy enough to crush any resistance. "Then what are you going to do?" Lachlan tilted his head slightly, as if considering his answer. A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips, barely there, yet enough to unnerve her. "I'll wait." 3 simple words, but they carried more weight than any threat ever could. She hated that answer, hated how he didn't need to use force, yet made it feel as though every road still led back to him. Hated that he had the patience to wait, while she wasn't sure how long she could keep fighting this. Lachlan wasn't in a hurry. He had all the time in the world, and most terrifying part was that a small part of her had begun to wonder if there was truly any other way out at all. Alara felt like she was being pulled into a game she no longer had control over. No rules, no escape, only one person holding the upper hand, and it wasn't her. Since that conversation on the balcony, Lachlan hadn't mentioned marriage again. No more possessive declarations, no more words laced with quiet command. But it was his silence that became the most insidious trap of all. He never told her to stay, but he was always there. He never touched her life directly, yet he existed in every small, inescapable moment. A glance as she passed him in the hallway, an offhand remark at dinner, hovering between jest and provocation. A silence that stretched just a second too long when his gaze lingered on her. She wasn't locked behind four walls, and yet she never truly felt free. So when Amelia placed an evening gown on her bed that afternoon, accompanied by a simple statement, he said, "You need to be at the party tonight," Alara knew the game was far from over. The Davenport Manor soiree was as lavish as any elite gathering. Golden light shimmered off crystal chandeliers, reflecting in the delicate clink of wine glasses. Laughter, smooth and polished, rippled through the air, words wrapped in layers of hidden meaning, where a single sentence could shift the tides of million-dollar deals. Alara stepped inside, poised and effortless, looking every bit as if she belonged. The black gown clung to her figure, silk cascading in elegant folds. No pearls, no diamonds, no extravagance, just quiet, understated beauty. And somehow, that made her stand out even more. She didn't need to look for him, because she knew Lachlan had already seen her. He didn't need to look for her, because in a room full of hundreds, they would always find each other. Lachlan lifted a glass of wine, swirling it lazily in his grasp. His gray eyes gave nothing away, yet they held the depth of a midnight sky. He moved toward her. Alara realized, too late, that she'd been holding her breath. No greeting, no invitation, just an outstretched hand, a silent command, a quiet challenge. And the most terrifying part was that she placed her hand in his without hesitation. They moved in time with the music, but this was no simple waltz. It was a battle. Lachlan led, as he always did. Alara followed, not in surrender, but in defiance, restrained just enough to blur the line between resistance and acceptance. His fingers tightened around hers, firm enough to remind her he wouldn't let her slip away so easily. "I told you, Alara." His voice was low, deliberate, each word carrying the weight of an unbreakable prophecy. Warm breath ghosted against her skin, laced with the faint scent of whiskey and sandalwood. "I won't need to force you. You'll make the right choice on your own." Alara didn't blink. She searched his gaze, looking for a crack, a weakness, something to grasp onto. But as always, Lachlan knew how to conceal his thoughts too well. She smirked, sharp as the edge of a blade. "You're always so certain, aren't you?" Lachlan tilted his head slightly, a dangerous glint flickering in his eyes. "There have never been exceptions." The words cut through her like a blade, leaving no room for denial. She couldn't tell him he was wrong, because at this moment, she wasn't sure she could fight him anymore. She hated this, hated how he didn't need power to keep her tethered, yet somehow, every path still led back to him. Hated how he could touch her like this, look at her like this, and make her forget she ever wanted to leave. Who was controlling who? They spun once more, and when Alara lifted her gaze, she met his. Just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to make every wall within her tremble. Lachlan no longer looked at her like a man who needed to control everything. He no longer looked at her like a predator hungry for victory. It was something deeper, something far more dangerous. "Are you trembling, Alara?" His voice was a whisper, gliding over her skin like a curse she couldn't escape. Alara tightened her grip on his shoulder, steadying herself. "No." Lachlan's lips curved, not in arrogance, not in triumph, but in the knowing smile of a man who had already won, because he knew she was lying. And the worst part was, so did she. Lachlan and Alara had always believed they were merely playing a game of strategy. But now, could either of them still deny what was truly happening between them? When hearts begin to betray reason, who will be the first to admit it? Or will they continue to deny their emotions, dragging each other deeper into a cycle of pain and resistance? Do you think Lachlan has truly fallen for Alara? Or is this just a deeper, more dangerous form of possession? Comment yes if you believe that Lachlan is in love with Alara. Alara never thought a newspaper could weigh so heavily on her heart. But as she stared at the bold headline on the front page of the country's most prestigious financial publication, she felt as though the ground beneath her had crumbled. Lachlan Davenport and Alara Kensington. A strategic marriage to solidify a financial empire. Below the title was a lengthy article outlining in meticulous detail why a marriage between them would benefit both their families. Kensington Corporation was losing its standing in the market. Lachlan Davenport was the perfect man to rebuild it, and in return, he would gain even more power. And Alara, whether she wanted to or not, was nothing more than a piece on a much bigger chessboard. Pictures from the recent gala were printed clearly on the page. Images of her in Lachlan's arms on the dance floor, of him whispering something close to her ear, of his gaze locked onto her, as if the world around them didn't exist. Once, she might have dismissed it as part of the game. But now, was it really just a game? Alara placed the newspaper down, but the words still burned in her mind. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to think that everything between them was orchestrated, calculated. But doubt had already taken root, winding its way through her thoughts, impossible to shake. She replayed every moment in her head. The invitations to exclusive events, where he was always by her side. The seemingly casual conversations, laced with implications about the future. His proposal, offered at a time when she was at her most vulnerable. Was she truly what he wanted? Or was she just the perfect piece to complete his empire? She wanted to believe in Lachlan, but a quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered, if it isn't true, then why hasn't he denied it? Alara clenched the newspaper in her hands and strode toward the library. She needed to hear it from him. She needed him to tell her the article was wrong. But when she pushed open the door, Lachlan's expression didn't shift in the slightest as he looked up at her. He was seated on a leather sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the newspaper already open in front of him. He had read it. He knew. Alara stopped in her tracks, her chest tightening. Do you have anything to say? Lachlan didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the newspaper slowly, his silver gray eyes sweeping over her with an unreadable intensity. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice deep, steady, but laced with something dangerous. Do you really believe what they wrote? Alara wasn't sure, but she needed him to deny it. She needed an explanation, a reason, anything that would let her hold on to the belief that he wasn't playing her. But he gave her nothing. He said nothing. And in that silence lay the cruelest answer of all. A hollow ache spread in her chest. She had always told herself not to trust Lachlan Davenport. But the truth was, she had believed in him far more than she realized. She let out a quiet laugh, but there was no warmth in it. I thought you'd at least deny it. Her voice was light, but the disappointment beneath it was unmistakable. Lachlan set his glass down, his gaze unwavering. I don't need to deny something that isn't true. But it was precisely that unwavering confidence that hurt the most. Because if he truly wanted her to believe him, why couldn't he just say the words outright? So then what was real? Alara didn't want to hurt herself any further. She didn't need to hear anything else. She had her answer. Whether the article was true or not, one fact remained. He didn't care whether she believed him or not. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, forcing herself to stay composed. Thank you for making it clear. Lachlan's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't give him the chance to respond. She turned and walked swiftly out of the library. He didn't follow. He sat there, watching as she disappeared from sight. For the first time in his life, Lachlan felt something slip out of his control. The grand ballroom sparkled with golden light, but amid the opulence, only two people truly faced each other. Lachlan had known Alara would come to him. He could see the anger simmering beneath her deep blue eyes, the pride that clashed with the raw wound she was trying so hard to conceal. She stood there, stepping closer with unwavering resolve. She hadn't come for an explanation. She had come for the truth. Alara lifted her wine glass, swirling the dark red liquid slowly, as if trying to control the storm within her. Then, she looked up, her smile colder than anything Lachlan had ever seen on her before. "Congratulations, Lachlan." Her voice was soft, but each word was a blade sharpened to perfection. "You did it. Everything played out exactly as you planned, didn't it? Our engagement is the talk of the world. The Kensington shareholders are in a frenzy, and you," she let out a quiet laugh, empty of humor, "you're still standing here unaffected, like none of this even concerns you." Lachlan didn't answer right away. He didn't like the way she was looking at him now. Distant. She was no longer the Alara who had challenged him in their battles of wit. No longer the woman who had refused to bow before him. The woman before him now was looking at him as if he had betrayed her. "Alara." His voice was low, steady. "You're misunderstanding this." She tilted her head, amusement laced with ice. "Am I? Then clarify for me, Lachlan. Let me hear the real truth." His grip on the glass and his hand tightened. This wasn't how he wanted to have this conversation. He could hear the way her breath caught slightly, the way she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. And for the first time, he felt uncertain. Lachlan stepped closer until the space between them had nearly disappeared. Alara didn't move. She had never been the type to back down. "You didn't deny the article," she said slowly, deliberately, watching him closely. "Not because it was true, but because you thought I would just understand, didn't you?" Lachlan's jaw tensed. "I don't need the media dictating what I want." His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable edge. "What you want?" Alara let out a soft, bitter laugh. She set her glass down on the table beside them, then lifted her gaze to his. "Then tell me, Lachlan, did you ever truly want me? Or did you just want Kensington?" The room seemed to still. Lachlan met her gaze, but he didn't answer right away. And that silence was the sharpest blade of all. Alara smiled, but there was no warmth left in it. "I see." Lachlan felt something slipping through his fingers. "Alara." She stepped back, fire flickering in her eyes. "You always have control, don't you, Lachlan?" She exhaled, shaking her head with a small, hollow laugh. "You never have to explain yourself because everyone just assumes you have a good reason. But me? I'm supposed to just accept your silence? I'm supposed to be a pawn on your board, is that it?" His hands clenched at his sides. "Alara, this isn't a game," she interrupted sharply, her voice laced with emotion. Lachlan held his ground. "No, it isn't." "Then what is it?" Her voice wavered, her eyes searching his. "Is it love? Do you even believe in that?" Lachlan stilled. He had never thought of love in the way she wanted him to. He couldn't lie to her, but he also couldn't say the words she needed to hear. And that was his mistake. Because in that single moment of hesitation, in the second he didn't reach for her, Alara looked at him as if he had just plunged a knife into her chest. She turned before he could say anything. Lachlan remained frozen as she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. He could go after her. He could stop her. But the problem was, he didn't know what to say. And as he watched her fade from view, a chilling thought settled into his mind. He might have just lost her forever. Alara didn't remember how she left the party. She only knew that every step felt unbearably heavy, like the very act of moving forward was suffocating her. And yet, she kept walking because stopping meant facing something she wasn't sure she could survive. Don't look back. Don't let anyone see the fractures splintering inside her. Don't let herself acknowledge it, the feeling that she had just lost something more important than anything else in the world. But she never had it to begin with. Lachlan was never hers. Whatever they had, whatever it was, had never truly belonged to her. Then why? Why did it hurt this much? Alara clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palms, sharp enough to sting. But she didn't loosen her grip. The pain was the only thing tethering her to reality, keeping the chaos in her mind from swallowing her whole. She didn't want to think about it. Didn't want to remember the way Lachlan had looked at her in that final moment. Didn't want to remember his silence. Didn't want to remember the words that were never spoken. She stepped into her room, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it, like the weight of the world outside was pressing down on her. She had thought she could control her emotions. She had thought she was strong enough not to believe in foolish things. She had thought she would never let herself end up like this. But the moment Lachlan couldn't answer her question, everything fell apart. She had wanted to believe him, had needed him to say something, anything to make her believe in what they had. But he didn't. He just stood there, his silence sharper than any words could have been. And that was what shattered the last fragile piece of faith she had left. On the other side of the party, Lachlan remained still, his grip on his glass so tight it might have shattered. His eyes lingered on the door she had walked out of, but his feet didn't move. He should have gone after her, should have stopped her. But even if he wanted to, he didn't know what to say. He was not a man who found himself a loss for words, not a man who lost control over anyone. But the moment she turned her back and walked away, leaving behind an emptiness he couldn't fill, he hadn't been able to say a single damn thing. What did Alara want him to say? That he truly wanted her? That was the truth. That everything between them wasn't just part of a plan? He hadn't been sure of that until now. That he wanted her for who she was, not for what she could give him. He had never considered it that way. But now that she was gone, now that she had truly left, he realized he couldn't let her disappear from his life. Lachlan set down his glass, barely noticing the curious glances from those around him. He left the party far later than he had planned. No one stopped him. No one dared to ask questions. But the truth was, even he didn't know what exactly he was searching for. As he stepped into the quiet mansion, once a battleground of wit and tension between them, he realized it had never felt this empty. His footsteps echoed through the long hallway, bouncing off the cold walls. Everything was the same, and yet it was completely different. He passed by familiar rooms, but everywhere he looked, there were traces of her. A book left open on the table, a teacup left untouched. Little things he had overlooked, things that had never mattered before. But now, with her gone, they felt like shards of glass cutting into him. At last, his steps halted in front of a door. Her room. His hand hovered over the doorknob, but he didn't open it, because he knew, no matter what was on the other side, she wasn't there anymore. She was truly gone. Lachlan stood there, hand on the doorknob, unmoving. He hated this feeling, the emptiness, the loss he didn't know how to name. He had thought that if she left, he would be fine, that he could go on as he always had, continue his life without her, that she had only ever been a part of his plan, nothing more, nothing less. But standing here, in front of this empty room, he realized he was wrong, so damn wrong. He took a step back, then hesitated. It was just a moment, a fleeting pause. But in that single second, something settled deep within him. Alara had changed everything. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure if he could ever take back control again. After all the misunderstandings and pain, Alara had left. And for the first time, Lachlan felt what it truly meant to lose something. But this wasn't the end. Nicholas, the one who had always stayed on the sidelines of their battle, would now be the one to reveal Lachlan's past, a secret that could explain everything. The real question was, when Alara learned the truth, could she forgive him? Alara wasn't surprised to see Nicholas Davenport standing at her door. Even though no one should have known she was here, she had always known that one day, Lachlan would come for her, or send someone in his place. What did surprise her, however, was Nicholas's expression. Not sharp as usual, not laced with his typical sarcasm. Calm, but far too serious. Alara. His voice was deep, like distant thunder rolling through the narrow space of her small apartment. Do you want to hear the truth? Alara's fingers clenched. He didn't say, Lachlan wants you to come back. He didn't say, he regrets everything. He only asked if she wanted the truth. And that was what made her hesitate. Because if she listened, she might not be able to hate Lachlan anymore. But whether she wanted to or not, she opened the door. Because a part of her had always wanted to understand him. Nicholas stepped inside, wasting no time, offering no pleasantries. He simply sat down, arms crossed, gaze steady. You think Lachlan couldn't answer your question because he didn't care? Alara said nothing. Nicholas tilted his head slightly, as if he could see through every thought running through her mind. He didn't answer, Nicholas continued, voice calm but firm, because he doesn't believe in the answer anymore. Something tightened in Alara's chest. Nicholas exhaled slowly before speaking again. Years ago, before you and Lachlan ever met, there was another woman. Alara's grip on her dress tightened. She had expected this. Lachlan wasn't the kind of man who had never loved before. But even though she had prepared herself, her heart still pounded faster. Nicholas's gaze sharpened. Lachlan loved her. He said it without hesitation. Really loved her. Alara swallowed hard. And then, she asked, keeping her voice steady. Nicholas let out a short, humorless laugh. She betrayed him. He leaned back in his chair, his voice dropping a fraction lower. Alara, do you know why Lachlan became a man he is now? She didn't answer. She wanted to know, but she was also afraid to know. Nicholas studied her for a moment, then spoke. Years ago, the Davenport family stood at the peak of power. No one could touch them. But there's one thing that can bring down even the greatest empire, placing trust in the wrong person. A chill ran down Alara's spine. Nicholas continued. She wasn't just someone he loved. She was the only person he trusted completely. And then, she sold him out. Alara froze. But Nicholas wasn't done. They were engaged. She swore she would stand by him forever. But do you know what she did? Alara shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. What did she do? Nicholas's smile was bitter. His eyes darkened. She used his love for her to steal every last business secret from the Davenport family. Then, the night before their wedding, she disappeared with a man from a rival corporation. Alara couldn't breathe, but Nicholas kept going. And right after that, Lachlan's entire family fell apart. Silence filled the room. Nicholas met her gaze, no trace of pity in his expression. Do you understand now, Alara? She still didn't answer. Nicholas leaned forward, his voice devoid of its usual edge, replaced by something far more serious. You asked why Lachlan couldn't say he chose you. His voice was quiet but unwavering, because he doesn't know how to believe in that anymore. Alara shut her eyes, trying to suppress the ache in her chest. If you were him, Nicholas asked, voice softer now, could you have said it? Alara opened her eyes. Her lips trembled. I don't know. Nicholas exhaled slowly, his gaze gentler than before. He's not heartless, Alara, he said. He's just a man who's lost faith for too long. The room fell silent. Outside, the rain pattered softly against the window. Alara didn't know what to do with this truth. She had always believed Lachlan was ruthless, a man incapable of love. But the truth was far more painful than that. He had loved. He had trusted, and in return, he had lost everything. So now, if he wanted her, what did that mean? Could she trust him? Could she gamble her heart on a man who no longer believed in love? Nicholas stood, adjusting his collar. He didn't know how to hold on to you, he said. But the real question is, do you really want to let him go? Alara clenched her hands into fists but didn't answer. Because the truth was, she wasn't sure what to do anymore. Alara didn't know how long she had been sitting there. Since the moment Nicholas left, she had remained still, staring at the cup of cold tea in front of her without truly seeing it. She had wanted the truth. Now she had it. So why did her heart feel heavier than ever? She thought that once she understood, once she knew that Lachlan never intended to hurt her, things would become easier. But they didn't, because understanding didn't mean forgiveness. And forgiveness didn't mean things could go back to the way they were. Alara closed her eyes, took a deep breath, but it didn't stop the images from replaying in her mind. The moment he stood there, right in front of her, but couldn't say a single word to make her stay. His silence, his hesitation, they were the sharpest knives that cut into her. She didn't blame him for his past. She only blamed the fact that his present had no place for her. Nicholas had said that Lachlan didn't know how to believe in love anymore. But did that even matter when in the end, he was the one who let her go? If one day, something else came between them, would he choose silence again instead of fighting for her? Alara stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still a dull, lifeless gray, just like a storm inside her. She was not a weak woman. She didn't need a man to beg her to come back. But she also couldn't be the only one holding on. Loving someone didn't mean accepting their silence. It didn't mean she had to keep running toward him while he stood in place. She loved Lachlan, but love alone wasn't enough to bring her back if he wasn't willing to step forward himself. Alara packed her bags, but her hands trembled slightly. Not because she was afraid to leave, but because she was afraid that no one would stop her. Before leaving, she wrote a note for Nicholas, each word pressing deep into the paper, almost as if she was carving them into herself. If he truly wants me, let him find me himself. She couldn't be the only one trying. If Lachlan couldn't overcome his past to reach for her, then they were never meant to belong to each other at all. Lachlan had gone to find her. For the first time in his life, he had set aside his pride and taken a step toward someone. But Alara was no longer there. She hadn't waited. She hadn't given him a chance to say anything. She had left before he could fix his mistake. And that was the cruelest punishment of all. Lachlan stood in the vast emptiness of the room, the air pressing heavy against him. Everything was the same. Nothing had changed, except she was gone. Nicholas leaned against the fireplace, watching him in silence. He didn't speak right away, didn't demand answers. He just observed, waiting to see how Lachlan Davenport would handle defeat. Lachlan shrugged off his coat, the movement harsher than necessary. He loosened the collar of his shirt, then paused, as if suddenly realizing he no longer had the strength for something so simple. Nicholas picked up his glass, swirling the amber liquid inside before exhaling softly. She didn't wait for you, did she? Lachlan lifted his head, eyes darkening. A question that already had an answer. Nicholas set his drink down, fingers tapping idly against the glass, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. What exactly were you expecting, Lachlan? His tone was quiet, but laced with something unforgiving. That she would stand there, waiting for you to show up and say something too little, too late? That just because you decided to come for her, everything would go back to the way it was? Lachlan clenched his fists. He didn't need Nicholas to tell him he had made a mistake. He knew, but knowing didn't make it hurt any less. Nicholas watched him, his sharp gaze unreadable. She left a message. Lachlan didn't react at first, but his breath did catch, just for a second. Nicholas placed a folded note on the table and slid it toward him. If he truly wants me, Nicholas recited, his voice slow, deliberate, then let him come find me himself. Silence. Lachlan stared at the words, his expression unreadable. Simple letters, nothing more than ink on paper. And yet, they held the weight of an entire decision. He didn't know how long he stood there, just looking, but every word carved deeper into him, cutting straight through the walls he had built. No accusations, no anger, just a truth. She would not come back, not unless he was the one to step toward her. And if he didn't, she would disappear from his world forever. Nicholas was still watching him, but this time his expression had shifted, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. A touch of pity, a trace of disappointment, and something else, something that looked like expectation. You had your chance to keep her, Lachlan. Nicholas's voice was lower now, quieter, and you let her go. Lachlan closed his eyes. Regret had never been a familiar emotion to him, but now it had settled deep into his bones. Nicholas lifted his glass again, but this time he didn't drink. Do you really think she'll wait for you? Lachlan didn't answer. Nicholas tilted his head, his gaze turning colder. She's not like the others. His words were slow, each syllable pressing into the heavy stillness. Once she's gone, she won't come back. Lachlan knew that. He had always known that. But only now, standing in the aftermath of losing her, did he understand how brutal that truth really was. Nicholas set his glass down. The sharp sound echoed through the silence. Then he leaned forward, voice dropping into something razor-sharp. You're not a coward, Lachlan. His tone was quiet, but the challenge in it was unmistakable. But right now, you're acting like one. Lachlan's head snapped up, silver-gray eyes flashing. But the absolute certainty they once held was no longer there. Nicholas let out a short, humorless laugh. You two are more alike than you realize. He leaned back, shaking his head. She's afraid too, but she didn't let it stop her. Lachlan's jaw tightened. He had never lost a battle before. But this felt like standing at the edge of his greatest defeat. Nicholas crossed his arms, his gaze piercing through the last remnants of Lachlan's defenses. And then, his final words cut through the silence like a knife. The only question is, his voice was quiet, deadly. Do you have the courage to do the same? Lachlan didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because whatever answer he gave would change everything. After everything, Alara had thought she had left Lachlan's world behind for good. She had believed she could walk away, leave the past, the power struggles, and him behind. She had convinced herself that as long as she kept moving forward, as long as she never looked back, everything would fade into a distant memory, never able to touch her again. But fate was never that simple. A crisis struck, unexpected and ruthless, pulling her back into the very world she had fought to escape. This time, Lachlan Davenport was not there to control her. He was there to protect her. Alara had thought that leaving Lachlan meant freedom. She had thought she could start over, build something for herself, carve out a life untouched by power games and manipulations. But fate was never that kind, because just when she believed she had stepped off the board, she was dragged back in, this time more mercilessly than before. Her breakfast was interrupted by a phone call from her family. The moment she picked up, she knew. This wasn't just another conversation. You need to come home. Now. Her father's voice was sharp, urgent. A quiet dread curled in her stomach. Her family had never truly cared for her. If they were calling, there could be only one reason. They needed her. And she was right. The Kensington Empire was crumbling. When Alara stepped into the family's boardroom, the weight in the air was suffocating. Every gaze turned to her. Her mother sat rigidly in her chair, her expression sharp enough to cut. Her father, arms crossed over his chest, face unreadable, calculating. And her relatives, people who had spent years treating her as an outsider, now looked at her as if she were the most valuable piece on their chessboard. Alara, her mother's voice was as cold as ever, every syllable slicing through the silence. You know why you're here, don't you? Alara's hands clenched at her sides. No one asked if she was okay. No one cared how she had left. They only cared what she could do for them. Her father's voice came next, heavy with the weight of authority. The company is on the verge of collapse. The shareholders are losing faith. We need a solution. Alara inhaled deeply, keeping her voice steady. And what exactly do you expect me to do? The answer came instantly, without hesitation. Marriage. Alara froze. She blinked, as if she had misheard. What? Her voice was quiet, hollow. They were discussing her life the same way they discussed business transactions. Her mother remained unmoved, her tone eerily calm. The Wentworth family has agreed. If you marry Alexander Wentworth, they will invest enough to stabilize the company. Alara laughed, a cold, sharp laugh that cut through the room like glass shattering. So that's all I've ever been to you. Not a daughter, not a person, just a bargaining chip. There was no question of what she wanted. No alternatives. No options. Just one demand. Accept or let her grandfather's legacy crumble. She took a slow breath, steadying herself, then spoke, her voice deceptively calm. No. Silence. The weight in the room shifted. Her mother remained expressionless. But her father, his gaze darkened, turning dangerous. One of her relatives scoffed, voice laced with quiet condemnation. Alara, don't be selfish. Another chimed in, smooth and practiced. Think of the family's reputation. Alara. She dug her nails into her palms. Every word, every demand, none of them were about her. Not a single one. They only cared about how much use they could make of her. She wanted to walk away, to turn her back on all of them. But she knew, if she left now, she would lose everything her grandfather had built. So the question remained, what the hell was she supposed to do? Alara once thought she had control over her own life. But as she stood in her family's boardroom, surrounded by piercing gazes and crushing expectations, she realized she never truly had a choice. Marry Alexander Wentworth. A marriage without love, without freedom, only numbers and business transactions. She had escaped one game of power, and now she was being thrown into another, one even crueler with no way out. The company needs this money. Her father's voice was low, final, like a verdict. If you won't think of yourself, then think of your family. This is the only way. Alara clenched her fists beneath the table. The only way? Had she ever truly had another option? Then, the sharp sound of doors swinging open shattered the tense atmosphere. Every head turned toward the entrance. No one expected an uninvited guest. But when Lachlan Davenport stepped into the room, the air thickened into something unspoken, suffocating. His gaze swept across the table, calm, slow, but carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore. These were men and women of power, individuals who could decide the fates of thousands with a single word. But in front of Lachlan, every single one of them suddenly seemed smaller. Alara stood frozen. How was he here? She hadn't told him. No one had. But when she met those cold, steel-gray eyes, she knew. He had always known. Her father's expression darkened. His voice was sharp. What are you doing here, Davenport? Lachlan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat down, unhurried, completely at ease. Like this was his office, not theirs. Silence pressed in from all sides. And then, with a voice smooth as a blade, he spoke. I'm here to make an offer. Alara's mother narrowed her eyes, suspicion laced in every syllable. What kind of offer? Lachlan leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other with a quiet confidence. I'll cover the full amount Kensington Holdings needs to recover. A ripple of shock swept through the room. Alara's breath caught. She thought she had misheard him. Low murmurs filled the air as the board members exchanged glances, their initial skepticism wavering under the weight of his words. Her mother was the first to regain composure, her voice sharp with distrust. And we're supposed to believe you're doing this out of generosity? Lachlan's lips curved, just slightly. Believe what you want, but the reality is this. I can save Kensington Holdings, and I require nothing in return. Her father braced both hands on the table, his expression unreadable. Davenport, you're a businessman. His voice was measured hard. I've watched you long enough to know you never make a move without personal gain. Lachlan inclined his head slightly. You're right. No hesitation. Her father's jaw tightened. Then tell me, what do you want? Lachlan didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to her. His gaze locked onto hers, steady, unwavering. Alara couldn't move. She wanted to speak, to tell him not to do this. But she couldn't. And then, he said it. One simple sentence. One sentence that turned everything upside down. Because I love you, and whether you choose me or not, I still want to protect you. The room turned to ice. No one spoke. Alara forgot how to breathe. For years, everyone had come to her wanting something. Her parents wanted her to marry for financial gain. The shareholders wanted her to be a pawn to save the company. Men of wealth wanted her because of the Kensington name. But Lachlan, he came asking for nothing. It was her mother who finally broke the silence. Do you really think that one statement is enough to convince us? Her tone was sharp as a blade. Lachlan turned his head toward her, his gaze cutting straight through her defenses. I don't need your approval. His voice was lethal, cold. I'm not here for you. Her father clenched his fists. You? What about you? Lachlan's voice cut through the tension like steel meeting ice. He wasn't looking at her father anymore. He wasn't looking at anyone else. Just her. Do you believe me, Alara? Everything around Alara blurred into nothingness. The unfamiliar faces of blood relatives. The scrutinizing stares, the carefully calculated words. None of it mattered anymore. There was only one person left. Lachlan Davenport, the man who had once hurt her, who had once let her walk away without a fight. But also the man who had walked in here tonight, stood before the entire Kensington family, and declared that he wanted nothing but her. No one had ever done that for her before. And the most terrifying part, she could no longer deny that she wanted to believe him. Alara. Lachlan's deep voice pulled her back to reality. She took a slow breath, but her heart still pounded wildly. She wanted to believe him, but she had believed him once before, and he had let her go without a word. Would he do it again? Alara met his gaze head-on. You said you don't want my company. Her voice was steady, measured. You said for the first time in your life, You're doing something without expecting anything in return. She paused, as if wrestling with herself. But what if I say no? Lachlan stilled. Would you leave? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer, because if he said yes, it would prove that this still wasn't enough. Lachlan held her gaze, his eyes piercing through every layer of her defenses. I won't leave. His words were carved into the space between them, unwavering, absolute. I didn't come here to negotiate. His voice dropped lower, just for her. I didn't come here to demand that you choose me. He paused, then stepped closer, slow, steady. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. I came here because I love you, and whether you choose me or not, I will still protect you. Alara had always believed she was strong. She could stand against her family. She could walk away from Lachlan without looking back. But right now, she wasn't strong enough to fight the truth anymore. She had spent so long believing that Lachlan could never love her the way she needed him to. But looking at him now, she knew she had been wrong. There was no possession in his eyes, no pride of man who had won, only someone who had placed his heart in her hands. Completely, unconditionally, Alara took a slow, steady breath. She turned her back on her family, on the people who had tried to control her life since the day she was born. She no longer cared about the judgmental glances, the threats from her father. There was only one choice left to make. She took a step forward, then another. Her heart pounded so fiercely it felt like it might break free from her chest, but she didn't stop. Finally, she stopped right in front of him. Lachlan didn't move. He waited. Alara looked up at him, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't running. She reached up, her fingers brushing against his face, so light, so delicate, as if the faintest breeze could carry it away. But Lachlan didn't move, as if he was afraid that if he did, she would disappear again. Alara gazed at him, her breath unsteady. Lachlan! He held his breath. Then, she rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his. No hesitation, no fear, just the only choice she had ever truly wanted to make. Lachlan went rigid for a second. He couldn't believe this was real. But the moment he realized Alara wasn't pulling away, wasn't pushing him back, wasn't fighting him anymore, he lost control. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her in, holding her as if she was the most precious thing in the world, something he would never let go of again. His kiss wasn't fierce, wasn't possessive. It was an acknowledgement, a promise. For the first time in his life, Lachlan Davenport wasn't in control, and he didn't care, because the last time she had walked away, he had let her go. But this time, he would never let that happen again, because Alara didn't want to leave anymore, because their love had never been a game. It was the only thing they both truly wanted to hold on to. After everything, Alara was no longer running. But love wasn't just about choosing each other. This time, Lachlan had to prove that he could love her the right way, without possession, without control, without treating her as a prize to be won. And for the first time, he would be the one making the final choice. Alara had thought that once she accepted Lachlan's love, everything would become clear, that she would no longer feel any doubt, that they would move forward together, never looking back. But a week after she had given up everything to be with him, she realized there was still something left unsaid between them. Lachlan was still here, still by her side, but he hadn't spoken of the future. No questions about marriage, no promises made, no proposal, and that unsettled her. That late afternoon, as Alara sat on Lachlan's balcony, watching the sky fade into hues of dusk, she felt an unfamiliar emptiness settle in her chest. She knew he loved her. She no longer doubted that, but she couldn't stop herself from wondering. Now that nothing was holding them back, was she truly his choice? If there was no power struggle, no war between their families, would he still want a future with her? Alara was not the kind of woman who dreamed of a fairy tale proposal. She didn't need a lavish ring or an extravagant celebration. She just needed to be certain that Lachlan wanted this, wanted a life with her, not out of duty, not because he felt responsible for her, but because he could not imagine a life without her. But she couldn't ask him, because if she had to ask, then he wasn't sure. And she didn't want a proposal out of obligation. She wanted a proposal born from love. As night fell, Elara remained on the balcony, lost in her thoughts. She didn't notice when Lachlan appeared, watching her in silence. "What are you thinking about?" His deep voice pulled her back to the present. Elara startled slightly, then shook her head. "Nothing." Lachlan didn't believe her. He knew Elara. He knew that when she bit her lip like that, she was thinking about something important. He stepped closer, settling beside her, his gaze steady. "Elara." His voice was calm but firm. "What are you waiting for?" She turned to him, her heart pounding. She didn't know how to answer, but she didn't have to, because Lachlan already knew. He studied her for a long moment, then he smiled. A quiet, tender smile she had never seen before. "I know what you're waiting for," he said, his voice lower now. Elara held her breath. Lachlan's silver-gray eyes locked onto hers, deeper than anything she had ever known. And then he said the words she never expected. "You don't have to wait anymore." Elara never thought that the most important moment of her life would come on an ordinary evening like this. Not over an elegant candlelit dinner. Not in a grand venue filled with hundreds of guests. No one was there to witness it. Just her and Lachlan in a small kitchen, surrounded by half-chopped vegetables and a man who had no idea how to slice an onion. She should have found it funny, but her heart was pounding harder than ever. "Elara, what are you laughing at?" Lachlan asked, raising an eyebrow as he caught her pressing her lips together to suppress a smile. She glanced at the cutting board, where the uneven, misshapen onion slices looked almost comically bad. Shaking her head, she murmured, "Nothing. It's fascinating that a man who runs an entire empire can't even cut an onion properly." Lachlan blinked, then smirked, his expression full of challenge. "I never said I was good at everything." He picked up the knife, attempting another slice. "But I learned quickly." Elara folded her arms, eyeing him skeptically. "Oh, I'll be waiting then." Lachlan focused, determined. But within seconds, he stopped, frowning at the still disastrous mess of onions before him. He sighed, setting the knife down. "Fine." His gaze lifted to hers, steady and unwavering. "I admit there are some things I'll never be good at. Like cutting onions, for example." Elara giggled. She didn't notice that, in that moment, Lachlan never looked away from her, as if he were memorizing every detail of her face, as if he were about to say something that truly mattered. "Elara." His voice was low, pulling her back to reality. She looked up, meeting his gaze, a gaze unlike any she had ever seen from him before. She blinked. "What?" Lachlan didn't answer right away. He simply watched her, long and deep, as if weighing something heavy in his mind. Then his voice came, slow and deliberate. "I never thought I could want something more than anything else in my life. Until now." Elara felt her heart stop for a beat. "What do you mean?" Lachlan stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth, his breath mingling with hers. Gently, he took the knife from her hands, setting it aside. Then he took her hands in his own, a firm, steady grasp. "Elara." He said her name again, his voice low but resolute. "I don't need a perfect evening." His words were careful, as if they were the most important he had ever spoken. "I don't need a meticulously planned proposal." Elara remained silent. Her heart was pounding so hard, she could hear it in her ears. "I just know," Lachlan continued, his gaze never wavering, never faltering, "that if there's one person I want to spend my life getting things right for, it's you." The world around them faded. No sound of the knife against the cutting board. No crackling from the stove. Nothing but the man standing in front of her. No ring. No grand, traditional proposal. Just a promise. A promise that he wasn't going anywhere. A promise that he truly wanted her, not for any reason other than because she was her. And that meant more than any diamond ever could. Elara took a deep breath, her heart stumbling over itself. "Lachlan," she whispered, her voice catching. He waited. No pressure, no rush, just letting her decide for herself. Elara didn't need proof anymore. She didn't need a ring. She didn't need the perfect proposal. She just needed him. She just needed Lachlan. And for the first time, she knew she wasn't running anymore. Elara couldn't breathe. She stared at Lachlan, at those silver-gray eyes reflecting nothing but her. The man who had once pushed her away. The man who had once hurt her so deeply she had wanted to erase him from her life, now stood before her, stripped of every mask, every ounce of arrogance, every wall he had ever built. Nothing left but a man willing to place his heart in her hands, whether she chose to break it or not. No ring, no grand stage, just a promise, spoken by a man she had once believed incapable of love. Alara took a slow, unsteady breath. A part of her was still afraid that one day, when things got too hard, he would step back like he had before. Afraid that she would stand in front of him once again, waiting for him to fight for her, only to be met with silence. Afraid that no matter how real this love felt, it could still fade someday. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw that he was afraid too. Not afraid of losing her, but afraid that she wouldn't believe him, that she wouldn't give him the chance to prove that this time, he wasn't letting her go. They had hurt each other before, but the love between them, it had never broken. It had never left. Lachlan squeezed her hand lightly, as if terrified that if he loosened his grip for even a second, she would disappear. Alara. She looked up, her clear eyes flickering with hesitation. I know you're still scared. His voice was deep, warm, a whisper in the dark. He paused, his gaze locking onto hers, piercing through every wall she had ever put up. I can't promise we'll never fight, he said, his voice quiet but sure. I can't promise it will always be easy. His grip tightened just slightly. But I can promise you one thing. Alara held her breath. I will never let go of you again. She shivered, not from fear, but because something inside her was unraveling, crashing over her like a tidal wave. She didn't answer right away, not because she didn't know her answer, but because her heart had answered long ago. The day he had walked into her family's boardroom, standing there, not to negotiate, not to strike a deal, but simply to tell her he loved her. The moment he had looked her in the eyes and said that whether she chose him or not, he would still protect her. The second she had realized that without Lachlan, nowhere in this world would ever truly feel like home. Alara smiled softly, but her eyes burned. She didn't say a word. She simply stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his neck, and pulled him down into a kiss. No hesitation, no fear, just an acceptance that needed no words. Lachlan froze for a single second, as if he couldn't believe this was real. Then, slowly, so achingly slowly, his arms came around her, holding her tight, holding her as if he had just reclaimed the most precious thing he had ever lost. He kissed her, deeply, tenderly, but with a desperation that nearly shattered her. As if he was memorizing this moment, as if he was telling her, without words, that he would never let her go again. Alara let herself drown in it, in the warmth of the man she loved more than anything. When the kiss broke, she rested her forehead against his, her eyes fluttering closed. A minute passed, then another. Lachlan was the first to speak, his voice hoarse with emotion. Do you believe me now? Alara let out a soft, breathy laugh, her fingers curling slightly into his collar. Yes, she whispered. Lachlan arched a brow. Are you sure? Alara leaned back just enough to look into his eyes, and the smile she gave him was softer than anything he had ever seen. She nodded, and this time, I'm not running anymore. Lachlan had never thought he could feel like this. No more tense negotiations. No more business strategies. No more power plays. No more doubts about love. There was only Alara, the woman who had made him break every rule, every barrier he had ever built. She was here, in his arms, no longer trying to run. And that meant more than any victory he had ever won. They stood on the balcony of his apartment, the city glowing beneath them. Lachlan held her from behind, his chin resting lightly against her hair. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Only the sound of their steady, quiet breaths filled the night. Alara could feel his heartbeat, strong and unwavering. At last, she broke the silence, her voice as soft as the evening breeze. Have you ever thought about the future? Lachlan's arms tightened slightly around her, his voice a warm murmur. I have. He paused. But I never thought it would have you in it. Alara smiled just faintly, but her heart ached with emotion. She turned in his arms, looking up at him, her eyes shimmering under the city lights. "And now," she whispered. Lachlan gazed at her, long and deep. Then he reached for her hand, lifting it gently, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Now, his voice was quiet, steady. "I can't imagine a future without you." Warmth spread through her chest, deep and overwhelming. She had once doubted this love, had once feared that Lachlan could never love her the way she needed, had once believed that they would always belong to different worlds. But now, looking into his eyes, she knew she had been wrong, because Lachlan had never belonged to any world. He had only been waiting for her to build one with him. She squeezed his hand, her fingers lacing with his. Then she hesitated. "Where do we start?" Lachlan smiled, soft in a way she had rarely seen. "We start with you saying yes." Alara let out a breathless laugh, her eyes shining brighter than ever. She took a deep breath, then nodded. The city lights still sparkled, but in this moment, the world held only the two of them. Alara was no longer running. Lachlan was no longer afraid. They had chosen each other, and this time they would never let go. Because this wasn't ending. It was the beginning of everything. Lachlan and Alara's love was more than just a romance. It was a reflection of the relationships we navigate in modern life. So many of us fear love. We fear getting hurt. We fear losing our independence. We fear that, in the end, the person we choose won't choose us back. But real love isn't about possession or control. It's about choice, about trust, about the willingness to fight through the hard days together. In reality, if you love someone, be brave enough to show it. Learn to communicate with honesty. Give each other the chance to make things right. Because love isn't a game to be won or lost. It's a journey, one you take together.